Douglas, and today we'll be reading The Tempest, obviously originally written by William Shakespeare, but rewritten by Andrew Matthews and Tony Ross. Our play today is set in the Mediterranean islands, so think a little bit of Greece, think a little bit of Italy, and along the coast there in the 15th century. Our fabulous cast list for today, and we've got Miranda, who is the daughter to Prospero, who is the wizard and the rightful Duke of Milan, Caliban, who's a servant to Prospero, Ariel, which is an airy spirit, actually a male, don't get confused with the Little Mermaid. Antonio is our Duke of Milan and the brother to Prospero. We've got Alonso, who's the King of Naples. We have Prince Ferdinand, who's the son of the King of Naples. And we've got Trinculo and Stefano, who are sailors. So in this children's version, obviously a bit of an adaptation to what Shakespeare traditionally does, is that we're following a, for lack of a better word, wizard, Prospero, who has used his magic to try and right the wrongs that have been done against him. So the fact that his title of being Duke was taken away from him and that he was cast away to an island with his daughter. And he wants justice more than revenge. He just wants things to be put right. He doesn't want to exact evil revenge, even though that's what's insinuated at the start of the play. Obviously, through a lot of trickery, deception and magic, which is very common amongst a lot of Shakespeare plays, Prospero fools his brother, Duke Antonio, and King Alonso and Prince Ferdinand along the way with all his bits and bobs, such as the sailors and Ariel and Caliban, to accept him back into his rightful place. This is a reading of The Tempest. A violent storm was raging over the island. Palm trees bent and swayed like dancers in the howling gale that tore off their branches and sent them tumbling through the air. On a beach not far from the mouth of his cave stood Prospero the wizard, his white hair and beard streaming out in the wind, his black robes flapping around him. As he raised his left hand, thunder rumbled. He lifted the staff in his right hand, and forked lightning cackled, flickering like snakes' tongues across the inky clouds. Out to sea, a ship with broken masts and tattered sails wallowed helplessly as the storm drove it towards a jagged coral reef. A lovely young woman in a white gown hurried out of the cave and ran towards Prospero, her dark hair whipping around her face. She caught the wizard by the sleeve and called out, "Father!" Prospero seemed not to hear her. His eyes burned silver with magic, and they stayed firmly fixed on the ship. "Father!" shouted the young woman. "What are you doing? Everyone aboard that ship will be killed!" Above the sound of the wind came a groaning crash of timber striking rock. A huge wave reared up like a startled horse and thundered down on the ship, making it vanish from sight. Prospero lowered his hands. The wind dropped to a gentle breeze, the boiling clouds faded into a blue sky, and the sun glinted on a calm sea. "No one has been harmed, Miranda," said Prospero. "Everything is as I planned. For your sake, I have used my magic to help right a great wrong done so long ago." "What wrong, father?" Miranda asked with a puzzled frown. "Enough," said Prospero. He moved his left hand in front of Miranda's face, and she fell into an enchanted sleep where she stood. Prospero took 2 paces towards the ship, looking out at the place where the ship had sunk. "Soon, my brother," he whispered. A sound made him turn his head in a time to see a strange creature creeping up behind Miranda. It was shaped like a man, but its skin was covered with glistening green scales, and its eyes were as yellow as lizards. "Caliban," Prospero said sternly, "you brought no wood or water to the cave this morning. Must I send the spirits to torment you again?" Caliban scowled. "I was not born to be your servant," he answered defiantly. "My mother, the great witch Cycrox, promised me that I would rule this island, and so I would have, if you had not come here and stolen her books of magic and freed her slave spirits to help you drive her away." "Silence," said Prospero, and he snapped his fingers. Needles of fire seemed to lance through Caliban, forcing him to his knees. "Mercy, master, mercy!" he cried, bowing his head. The pain left him, and he hid his face so that Prospero could not see his cunning smile. "Why are you so cruel?" he whimpered. "You were kind to me once, and you repaid my kindness by trying to kidnap my daughter," snapped Prospero. "Get to work, you treacherous wretch!" Caliban stood and shambled off. "I will be revenged one day," he muttered to himself. "I will be king of this island, and I will take Miranda as my queen." When Caliban was safely out of sight, Prospero lifted his staff. "Ariel," he called softly, "appear to me now, sweet spirit." There was a faint sound of music. Lights sparkled in the air, winking like sunshine on bursting bubbles. In the midst of the lights fluttered a young boy with golden skin and white wings on his heels. He smiled at Prospero and darted playfully around his head. Prospero laughed. "Faithful Ariel," he said, "are the sailors scattered over the island as I commanded?" "They are, good master," said Ariel, his voice like the gentle humming of a harp. "And where is Ferdinand, the king of Naples' son?" Prospero demanded. "Close by," said Ariel. "He mourns his father, believing him to be drowned." "He is not drowned," said Prospero. "He wanders the island lost with my brother Antonio." Prospero sighed, and old memories gave his face a far-off look. 12 years ago, when I was Duke of Milan, my wife died," he said, sadly. "Grief blinded me to the treachery of Antonio, who plotted in secret with my old enemy, King Alonso of Naples. They overthrew me, and Antonio took my place. I was put in an open boat with my daughter and cast adrift to die. But destiny took me to this island, to Cycrox's magic books, and you. My spells brought the ship here, and now it is time for mischief and magic." "And revenge, master?" said Ariel. Prospero shook his head. "I do not seek revenge, only justice," he said. "Go to Prince Ferdinand and bring him here." Ariel's eyes darkened into doubt. "Will it be as thou promised, master? When thy plan is done, shall I be free?" "Free as the wind, my Ariel," said Prospero. "I will break my spells. No magic will ever hold you again." Ariel glowed brightly and flew off faster than Prospero's eyes could follow. Prince Ferdinand was seated cross-legged on the sand. Salt water and the sun had bleached his brown hair almost blonde, and his handsome face was lined with sadness. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw the massive waves that had swallowed the ship and cast him up on this uncharted island. He might never be found. He wondered if it would be better to swim out to sea and join his drowned father with a face of miserable loneliness. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by lights dancing in front of his face, swarming like bees. They were so fascinated that Ferdinand could do nothing but stare at them. Then he heard music and the singing of a sweet, high voice. "Forget thy father, deep he lies, with shining pearls set in his eyes. Come with me now, Prince Ferdinand, and walk along the yellow sand." Ferdinand seemed to be caught in a dream. Without a word he stood and followed where the lights led him. Prospero saw Ferdinand from afar, following bewitched behind Ariel's glimmering lights. When the young prince was close by, Prospero touched Miranda on the shoulder, releasing her from the spell. Instantly she woke, and the first thing she saw was Ferdinand. "Is this a spirit, father?" she gasped. "No, my child. It is a man of flesh and blood, like you and me," Prospero told her. "But I thought all men had white hair and beards like yours," Miranda exclaimed. Prospero smiled and signalled to Ariel. The dancing lights vanished, and Ferdinand's trance was broken. He saw Miranda, and his eyes filled with wonder at her beauty. "Am I still dreaming?" he whispered. "Is this a vision?" "I am no vision, sir," Miranda said. "I am as real as you are, if you are indeed real." Shyly she reached out her hand. Ferdinand reached out his, and their fingertips touched. "I saw it in the stars you were meant for each other," Prospero said softly. "Your love will undo all the evil done by hatred." Ferdinand and Miranda heard nothing of this, for they were totally lost in each other. "Ariel," said Prospero, "find King Alonso and my brother Antonio. And when you do, Ariel listened carefully, and before long, the air was bright with his laughter. On another part of the beach, two sailors swayed across the sand, leaning against each other to stop them from falling over. One was Trinculo, a thin man with ginger hair and a freckled face, and his companion was Stefano, who had a shock of grey hair and a stomach as round as a watermelon. They had been washed ashore together with a cask of wine, which they had fast consumed. Now they were so drunk that when Caliban jumped from behind a rock and grovelled at their feet, they were not entirely sure that he was really there. Caliban had been watching Trinculo and Stefano for some time, and his quick, cunning mind had seen a way to use them to get rid of his master Prospero. "Gentle gods," Caliban cried, "have you come from the sky to save me?" "Things were gods," Trinculo giggled. "He's an ugly brute, but knows good breeding when he sees it," whispered Stefano. That's right, we're gods from the moon," he said to Caliban. "Save me," Caliban begged. "Save me from the wicked enchanter who has enslaved me, and I will give you all his treasure, and be your faithful servant forever." "Enchanter?" yelped Trinculo, turning pale. "Courage, Trinculo," Stefano murmured. "And what kind of treasure might that be, good monster?" "Gold," said Caliban, "and silver, and many jewels." Stefano drew his cutlass and waved it so clumsily that he almost cut off his right ear. "Pirates and enchanters, it's all the same to me," he boasted. "Take me to the villain. I'll carve him into thin slices." With a whoop of delight, Caliban led the way along the jungle track to Prospero's cave. After the long walk through the jungle's heat and shadows and strange sounds, Stefano's head began to clear, and he no longer felt as bold as he had earlier, and Trinculo was trembling like a mouse's whiskers. So much further?" Stefano asked Caliban. "There," Caliban replied, pointing. Trinculo stood on his tiptoes and peered. He could see the mouth of a cave, filled with an ominous darkness. "Oh, why don't we walk side by side?" he gibbered. Then nothing will harm us." Even as he spoke, the darkness in the cave began to move. It poured out of the cave mouth, coiling like black mist, and the mist transformed itself into a pack of savage dogs with red eyes and slavering fangs. Snapping and snarling, the dogs bounded towards the intruders. Trinculo and Stefano turned and ran, screaming into the jungle, with Caliban close behind. King Alonso and Antonio had been wandering through the jungle for hours, and now they were desperate with thirst and hunger. Their fine clothes, ripped by cruel thorns, hung around them in tatters, and sweat streamed down their faces. Alonso, certain that Ferdinand was dead, was stricken with grief, and at last he slumped onto the trunk of a fallen tree. "I can go no further," he groaned. "I will wait here for death, to put an end to my misery." Antonio glanced around uneasily. The jungle was an eerie place, full of shadows and whispering voices. "Just a little further, my lord," he said. "I see a clearing not far ahead. Perhaps we will find a spring of fresh water there." The thought of water urged Alonso to his feet, and the two of the men stumbled towards the edge of the clearing. Like a mirage, in the middle of the clearing stood a long table, piled with food and drink, golden platters of carved meats, whole roasted fowl, baskets of bread, golden jugs of wine. Alonso and Antonio hurried towards it, but before they could reach the feast, there was a dazzling flash of light and Ariel appeared. He hovered over the table in the shape of a harpy, a monster with a human head and a giant body of an eagle. Alonso tried to snatch a jug of wine, but the harpy hissed and slashed at him with its bronze talons. "Foul spirit, why do you torment us?" Antonio sobbed. "For thy betrayal of thy brother Prospero and niece Miranda," the harpy screeched. "Thou and King Alonso did set them in a boat and leave them to the mercy of the ocean, Prepare thee for thy punishment. Alonso and Antonio stared in amazement, wondering how the spirit had discovered their guilty secret. They expected the harpy to tear them into pieces, but instead it faded into a cloud of tiny lights that swirled like specks of dust floating in a beam of sunlight. The two men felt themselves fall into a waking sleep and heard a voice speaking to them out of the cloud. "Come," it said. "Follow, follow." From all over the island, the crew of the wrecked ship came to gather on the beach near Prospero's cave, drawn there by magic. Even Trinkaloo and Stefano, who had aching heads and torn clothes from where the hounds had snapped at them. The sailors rejoiced to see friends they thought had perished, and gazed about in wonder. Had the storm only been a dream, or were they dreaming now? For there was their ship, undamaged, anchored close to the shore. The sailors laughed and scratched their heads, unable to believe their luck. Ariel brought Alonso and Antonio to the mouth of Prospero's cave, and broke their trance. Alonso gasped as Ferdinand and Miranda stepped out of the darkness, hand in hand, and his eyes blurred with tears. What wonderful new world is this that has such people in it, he wondered. The world that will be made when we return to Naples and our children are joined in marriage, said a voice. Alonso and Antonio turned and saw Prospero standing behind them. Antonio could not meet his brother's eyes and hung his head in shame. "Let our hate be ended by their young love, Alonso," Prospero said. He came forward and placed his hand on Antonio's shoulder. "I forgive you, brother," he said. "We will rule Milan together and end our days in peace. Now go down to the shore and make ready to leave this island forever." "Are you coming, father?" asked Miranda. "In a moment, my child," Prospero said. He waited till he was alone and then whispered, "Ariel?" Ariel grew out of emptiness. Too excited to hold one shape, he turned into a hummingbird, then a butterfly, then a winged unicorn. "I've burned my books of magic and my wizard staff," Prospero declared. "You are free to go, my Ariel, but I shall sadly miss you." "And I shall miss thee, dear master," said Ariel. "But look for me in springtime blossom, or when the summer breeze stirs thy curtain, or when the winter stars blaze bright. Until then, farewell." "Farewell, sweet spirit," said Prospero, and he turned away so that Ariel would not see the tears in his eyes. As the ship's sails unfurled and it began to glide away, Caliban came out of his hiding place in the jungle. He danced on the beach, turning cartwheels as he whooped, "I'm king of the island! King!" His voice frightened a flock of parrots who clattered out of the treetops and flew over Caliban in a great circle, their plumage glittering like the jewels in a royal crown. Our main theme throughout the Tempest is power, where we look at Prospero obviously looking to be evil from the start because he causes a storm and a shipwreck and he enslaves a spirit and has a monster as well, so that's Ariel and Caliban. However, throughout the play we discover that Prospero isn't quite as evil as we once thought was, because really he just wants to be returned to his title and land that he originally already had in the first place. Additionally, Prospero puts aside his power to allow Ferdinand and Miranda to be together, because they're together, therefore I should get the justice I deserve, and things like that. I couldn't find many modern day adaptations. One that is most popular, that is usually shown when learning this text, is The Tempest, as a 2010 film with Helen Mirren. A key difference between the film and the play is that the protagonist, Prospero, is a female rather than traditionally a male, so that's Helen Mirren's role. And rather than Prospero being a duke, Prospero is the duke's wife and is accused of killing her husband with witchcraft, and so then her title gets removed. But Prospero, her desire is that she wants to prevent the same kind of accusations happening to her daughter. So instead of rather getting back his rightful title and lands, she's looking at preventing the same thing and the accusing of witchcraft happening to her daughter.